Welcome to the Empaths Revolution podcast, the home of intersectional spirituality. Empaths Revolution is a platform dedicated to empowering, informing, and supporting empaths and other spiritually sensitive people via podcasts, expert guests, blogs, books, and personal one-to-one and group support. I'm your host, Harris Eddie Hill, and I'm non-binary, neurodivergent, and an intuitive empath. I'm a podcaster, best-selling author, NLP practitioner, and timeline therapist, and I'm pleased to bring you today's episode. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Empaths Revolution podcast. And today I'm so excited to be joined by Esther Lemmens. Hey.
Hey.
How's it going?
Good. Yeah.
Good. It's such an honor to have you on today. For the listeners, Esther and I are friends, and we're like fellow podcasters, and that's how we started, like talking to each other. Mm-hmm. Esther runs the podcast 50 Shades of Gender, on which I was a guest, and since Esther's been going through some spiritual stuff, we talk about that sort of thing a lot, don't we? And I thought, yeah, with your latest sort of forays, I was like, I've got to get Esther on. So so I thought we would start a little bit, Esther, with your podcast and like why you started your 50 Shades of Gender podcast and how it's kind of evolved.
Well, okay, so nutshell version.
So
about 10 years ago, I met someone who was going to be my partner. They were non-binary and trans woman at the time, but they've kind of evolved into a non-binary space. So that kind of opened up a new world for me, really. And I considered myself bisexual kind of until then, but then I was like, maybe that needs to expand a bit. Although bisexual can obviously include, two or more genders. But for me, I was like, I'll adopt the term pansexual, which they, told me about. And as we got to know each other better, I also met loads of other, trans and non-binary people. And I learned so much. And I felt like I got a real sense of feeling at home and a sense of belonging and like the queer community as I embraced more of who I was. And some years ago, we had we were sort of brainstorming some ideas, very creative people. So that was kind of a normal thing. And we thought about, there was the whole 50 Shades books that were all the rage at the time. And we thought, why not start a book? Or like, why don't we make a book, a collection of 50 stories of local gender diverse folks, just to show the diversity in just one place, like here in Norwich, where I live. And then the idea got shelved. But then like a few years ago, maybe in 2018, like it started popping into my head more and more. And I know when that happens, like my intuition is like, trying to get my attention. So I know something needed my attention, but I wasn't quite sure. At the time, it was going to be a book still. So I was like, well, this feels really quite an intense project. So how am I going to do this? And like the intuition I got, like the guidance I got was just start with one conversation with one person, record it, have it transcribed, then you'll have a book chapter. That was the plan at the time. So I did exactly that. I sat down with a friend. I asked them if they wanted to, have this conversation with me. So we had the conversation. I recorded it. And then I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to end up with all these audios. Why don't I do something with the audios? And then the idea for the podcast was born. So the second conversation I had with another friend around my table here was with the intention of, using the audio. And over 2019, I had like 5 or 6 more conversations. Early 2020, I had a few more. And then when I had 8 that I was going to use, middle of sort of 2020, just a few months after lockdown, I thought, well, just start, but I was overthinking it big time. I was like, I need to learn all the things, and I need music, and I need this, and I need that. And I got to a place where I was like, just forget it. Just forget the music. Fuck it all. And just do it. Just make an episode, put it out there. That was just like, and that's a really challenging thing for me because I'm like a recovering perfectionist, and I like to, overthinking is one of my things. So it was really good for me to just help me deal with all those things, really. And just I had to almost bypass my mind, my thinking mind, and just focus on doing these intuitive, things that I was guided to. So yeah, so I put an episode out, and then I thought, holy shit, what have I done? Now I have to keep this up. Do you know what I mean? Like momentum and stuff. So as I had these 8 conversations like banked, I then, sort of figured everything out, like how am I going to do this, podcast hosting, editing, just all the things. So I kind of learned as I went. And then I ran out, and then it was a bit stressful. I felt like 10 episodes or something, because I was like, oh no, I need an episode. It's just contacting people like, do you want to be a guest? Can we do it tomorrow? Do you know what I mean? It was just too stressful. So I kind of figured out a better way of doing it, planning ahead more. And then I was doing an episode a week until last October, when I went to fortnightly episodes once every couple of weeks, because it was just becoming like a lot to do for just me. So that's where I'm at the moment. So this week is episode 78 going to come out.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's so nice to listen to. I really like in your podcast at the beginning, you ask people what their labels are and what it means to them.
Yeah.
And it's so amazing to me, because I think there's so much, like, I've witnessed a lot of infighting in the community of people arguing, or this word categorically strictly means this, and I'm like, listen, it's got to work for the person. The labels aren't more important than the people. So I really like people explaining what it means to them, and why those words bring them joy, or sense of belonging and stuff. And
totally. And that means, like, you can't be wrong about your own experience. So there's certain arguments that you see going on, there's no need for them. There's no, like, right and wrong is like, that's not the way to look at this stuff. I think it's just, like you say, what works for a person. And like, if they're happy with a certain language and someone else is not, then so be it.
Yeah. What do you think you've learned about gender identity since doing this? Like, what do you think is the overarching thing?
Well, I've learned so much about it, and now I understand it even less. Like, the more I learn about it, the more I'm like, what is, I'm just like mind blown a little bit. So I was sort of questioning it made me start to question gender as a construct, as a thing, gender roles and gender expression, and I don't know what else. And then I thought, okay, can I question gender without questioning my own gender? So I started thinking about that. There's, like, cis and trans, which is kind of a binary in itself, but then you see other areas popping up in there. And also I wondered, like, I asked myself the same questions I asked my guests, like, what does it mean to you to be non-binary or trans? So I asked myself, what does it mean to me to be a woman? And then I was like, oh, goodness me, I don't even really know. So it was like, I was born with these genitals, and then someone said it's a girl, and then I was conditioned and socialized and raised in this particular way because of that, and then that caused me to have these experiences, and that's as far as I got. So for me, I don't really know what it means to me, but I know there's obviously a collective experience of womanhood, but there's also a very individual experience of womanhood. Every woman would describe their experience of womanhood differently, So I feel like I'm still figuring it out a little bit, and I haven't quite got an answer yet. But I know that's kind of part of my journey, and I'm quite happy to be on it. I just feel like I'm really curious about it. I'm not like, oh my God, all the foundations of my identity have been shattered. Do you know what I mean? I don't feel like that. So yeah, I just find it fascinating. And the more conversations I have, the more I feel like I learn and evolve, and it's just, wow.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Do you think that you're better able to navigate the unknown now than you would have been 10 years ago?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That would be a definite yes. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
I think being around people who are different and not only comfortable with it, but enjoy those, there are benefits to everything, pretty much everything. And especially in terms of, like, identities and life experience, and sort of who you are and how that sort of comes forth. So I think being around lots of different people, it now, I don't know about you, but it now is jarring for me to talk to somebody and for them to say something like, well, that's what everybody does, or why wouldn't I do that? I'm like, that's weird, man. Why would you do something because someone's told you to do it, especially
because
big
I'm
life?
a sheep. Yeah.
Well,
sheeple, right? It's true though. Like, but if you're not aware of stuff, because I think what this gender journey, like in myself and with others, has done for me is, like, you just question everything. You question what's normal or normative or normalized, And then once you start doing that, wow, then you're onto something, you know. And it's like you see that the whole history of like my experience of womanhood, for example, and the experiences I've had and the things that I used to consider normal that I did and that I was taught, it's full of misogyny and sexism, and I didn't even know it. Do you know what I mean? And I was a part of perpetuating that, because it was like I didn't question it, I didn't know any better, but now I do. And I feel like I find it really funny, because in a way, like, you know, awakening to things like that, it's kind of like the adult version of a kid being told Santa doesn't exist. Do you know what I mean? I find it's really a bit like that. And you're like, you look around at your life and your, you know, how you've lived your life and society at large, and you're like, what the actual fuck have I been doing with my, do you know what I mean? Yeah, it really is like that. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a really weird one. But similarly to you, when I think I talked about this on my episode of you, I think, but my first coming out was when I was 14, and I also initially used the term bisexual because I had nothing else. And I guess that made me think a little bit more openly about sexuality. And I think as well, being bisexual and coming out as bisexual in the noughties was not, at school, was not easy to navigate anyway. But I definitely think it was the gender thing more than anything. Once that sort of normalization went out of the window, everything went with it. I was then questioning like romantic attraction, marriage, you know, the normalization of having kids and how it's weird if you have a uterus and don't want them.
right.
You know, different types of relationships. And I thought we could get onto that later if you fancy. You know, I've got lots of friends now who are like polyamorous or practice ethical monogamy. Lots of friends who are asexual or along that spectrum, or aromantic and along that spectrum. And I feel like it's completely opened my eyes to all of the things that we are expected to, like you say, perpetuate and believe. That's total bollocks. And it's so freeing. It's so freeing. And I have to say, I think when I come across people who are you know, bigoted and claim that they're bigoted for religious reasons, I actually understand why they're scared, because I think the amount of liberation and actually the falling away and the collapse of all of these expectations that you have is quite daunting.
It is. It really is. Yeah, I think so too.
So tell me about your, if you're, as much as you're happy to share, because I'm not sure that I ever want to have children. I really like them as people. I've got a lot of friends who are children, you know, like, and I'm like totally besotted with my niece. I love her to bits, but I don't really know. It's the pregnancy thing I actually would like to experience. I think, yeah, I'm pretty sure I would like to, but I don't know that I could hack being a parent. I don't know that I would be happy. I don't know that it's for me, and I don't know that I would. I don't really have a good reason why I would actually do it besides wanting to experience making a human.
Yeah. Well, that's valid, you know. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I've reached a point as well where I'm like, I've always said the one thing I definitely know I want is like a partner or a marriage. And I've actually reached a point where I'm like, I don't know if I want a partner, possibly more than one, and I don't think I want to get married at all.
How it evolves, isn't it?
Yeah.
I just remember being a kid and looking at the relationships that mostly my family, like there was my mum and dad, and like my mum's side of the family, like my grandparents at the time, it was very much a family thing. You know, we used to get together every weekend, every Sunday, and play board games and, you know, drink tea and coffee and have flour and things like that. And I just remember observing these, because I was the eldest grandchild. My mum was the eldest child in the family, and I was the eldest grandchild. And I just remember growing up and looking at all the people around me as an example, because it's like, say, do as I say, not as I do. Do you know what I mean? It's like, that doesn't work, does it? Does it ever? But I remember just looking around and thinking, am I meant to be doing that? Is that what is expected of me? Because I'm like, can I opt out can I pass? Because I'm really not up for it. You know what I mean? I've also never wanted kids. I've never like had that not maternal instinct necessarily, because I think you can have maternal instinct without necessarily being broody or anything. But I've never had that feeling that sometimes some of my friends have described, like they see a baby and they're like, oh, what, do you know what I mean? Like that broody thing. I was
like your ovaries are going a bit nuts.
Yeah, like they're pinging and stuff. And I'm like, that's never happened to me. I honestly don't know what that's like. And also the idea of like being pregnant and giving birth has always been a bit like, ugh, to me. I don't know what that is, but I've always had that. I was like, oh no, thank you. No. So that's that. I've just never had the desire to. And I've also thankfully never been in a situation where I've had to make difficult decisions, you know, because I have friends who were like, weren't necessarily planning to be parents, but it kind of happened to them and they went with it, you know, and some did not. So yeah, thankfully I've never had to make those decisions. So that is, I'm grateful for that. But yeah, and I can't even imagine though, because I feel like I was so like naive and I was like, what did I know? Do you know what I mean? Like the age, I think, when most people have kids, like they themselves are still kids, not necessarily in a like happy inner child kind of way, but in a like, you know, more of an immature kind of way. I mean, we all have it, we all do it, we all are that. But yeah, so it's, I think the younger people have kids, maybe like the easier it is to pass on all this, you know, ingrained conditioning and stuff like that. Whereas if I were to become a parent like later in life, I mean, at the moment that ship has sailed, I can tell you that much. But like if I were to have become a parent later in life, it would have been very different, I think, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, I totally get that. How do you feel about your life? Because I mean, you've talked before about being like a solo polyamorous person. So you like your own space, but also you're having these sort of connections with like more than one person, and then you don't, you know, you don't have do you have pets?
I have a pushing just there on my
okay
no, but my former partner does have a lot of cats, so I've spent a lot of time with them. I love cats, but I feel like I just can't have a cat of my own, because I find it really difficult. I get like the way I get attached and the way I would worry, and I'm like, I just can't even cope with the idea of it. So yeah, but sharing the cats, like their cats, you know, that was wonderful. Yeah,
cool. So you're living quite you know, an independent life, and so far you seem to quite like it. Are you quite pleased that things have gone this way?
I do actually. I do really love it. And also I've learned to be a bit more mellow about it than I used to be, because I think maybe I could be very rigid about stuff. It's like, yes, this is who I am, like solar poly. Do you know what I mean? I found this term, really resonated with it. And I thought, this is who I am. But I'm also like open to, it's not something I would do right now because I'm not in that place, but like to maybe share a home with other people. I mean, I can't imagine wanting to right now, but I'm also not going to say, oh, I never want that again. Do you know what I mean? Because how will I know? And then I think if you get too attached to your own labels and where you see yourself and parts of those, you know, parts of your identity in that way, I think you can shoot yourself in the foot, because sometimes I felt like the label bisexual needed to evolve for me. So I either needed it to include like 2 or more genders, or I needed to change it, which I did, to pansexual. So yeah, but I found there was a lot of resistance in me in like letting that label evolve, or letting that part of me go and embracing a new thing, you know?
Yeah, I think that evolution is the hardest thing to get your mind around. I think when we're kids, we talk like everything's this way. You've got men and women, they marry each other, they have kids. And I think the first time you learn that there are things outside of that, you think, oh, well, it's just a different system and I just learn the rules for that. And then you go a bit further and you go, oh, well, actually, it's a bit more fluid than that. You can't predict this and you can't predict that. And just because somebody's born a certain way, you can't actually predict who they're going to love or how they're going to identify with any sort of like mega accuracy. I mean, you know, you could have your best guess. But I think like recent big surveys done in the US and the UK, I think it was in 2018, young people, I think between 16 and 25, and it was like nearly half of them identified as something other than straight.
Mm. Yeah, that makes total sense, really. But the thing is, as well, as you start, like, gender is one of those things when you meet gender non-conforming people, or when you look at relationship styles other than monogamy and stuff like that, it just highlights, I think it just shines a light on all the issues there are with all this normative stuff. You know, like if you have someone who's like my former partner came out as asexual some years ago, and it is really difficult. Like if one person in the relationship is ace and the other person is not, like how do you navigate that? And then it kind of just blows everything out of the water. Be like, this thing about one person meeting all your needs, it can be quite toxic, do you know what I mean, and unrealistic. So why not have both your needs met if you can find some needs met, like to be met somewhere else? And like navigating that is difficult. It's really challenging because it challenges like everything that maybe like monogamy is built on, do you know what I mean? Like, on all these assumptions and like these rules, like it should be this way and this is acceptable and not that, and all that stuff. And like, I think in their monogamous dynamic, it's very, not very easy, but it's easier, I think, to avoid things like jealousy and dealing with that, because there's something underneath that emotion. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you feel insecure? Do you feel unsafe? Do you feel rejected? Do you have trauma issues that you need to deal with? Do you know, when there's so much underneath that? And I think that can be easily avoided. Like if you're in a monogamous dynamic, there's just certain rules you follow. But then I think there are a lot of monogamous people that are not necessarily happy, and they've settled, you know, because that's what they think their lot is. And for some people it is, you know, that is what they have, and that's what they are settled in. But also, like, there was something you just said, actually, like the ethical non-monogamy. And the word ethical there is really interesting, because that automatically indicates that, like, there's nothing inherently ethical about monogamy. It's just one relationship style, you know. And just like a lot of people maybe think, oh, if you're polyamorous, then you hate monogamy and you hate people who are monogamous. You know, it's not like that. It's like, no, that's just one way to do relationships. And it's a valid way. But there are also other ways that are actually realistic options. And like, not everyone can meet your needs necessarily, and that's not their job either. Do you know what I mean? Like, what is my responsibility? What is theirs? Like, recognizing codependency.
Yeah.
And you know what that is, like people pleasing and all that stuff. That's stuff that I've been unpacking, and that's to do with, you know, exploring these new relationship dynamics. And it's like, wow, you know, it's not easy. Therapy is good. Therapy helps.
Thank God for therapy.
Exactly.
So over all of the episodes that you've done, not that I've listened to every single one, but I've listened to quite a lot of them.
Nice.
Every so often you bring up the idea of spirituality, or the people that you have on are spiritual or religious people.
Mm-hmm.
Have you formed any kind of like spiritual beliefs around the LGBTQ plus community at this point? Or do you have any sort of like ponderings or thoughts that come up often?
That's an interesting one. Yeah, the connection with the LGBTQ community. Not quite sure. I mean, in myself, I feel like it is probably all connected, because the more I get to know myself, and like when I take up all this conditioning off and I shed all this stuff that I've been taught to believe and to, you know, how to live my life. And the more I start finding or rediscovering myself, you know, and what makes me tick, and like, what do I want and what do I need? That's another challenging one, especially if you've lived your life as a people pleaser, you know, like what are my needs even? It's like, oh, I must have some, you know, I mean, trying to figure that out. So I think as I discover, it's an ongoing thing, as I discover more of who I really am, I think it's a matter of, yeah. Can you ask the question again? Because my brain went somewhere else.
I wondered if you had kind of started to form a connection between like any sort of spiritual beliefs around the queer community.
Yeah, so I feel like, yeah, it is connected. So the more I discover about me, the more I've been tuning into my intuition. And I've been interested in the concept of channeling for several years now, and looking into, you know, things like law of attraction and Abraham Hicks and all that kind of stuff. Like people who channel like in the moment. And I've always found it fascinating, but I never considered myself to be that kind of person or someone who does that. But then since I've learned more about channeling, there's so many different ways in which you can do it, like the clairsenses. Some people are clairvoyant, they see things. Some people hear voices. That's a whole other conversation, right, as well, because, you know, mental health and stuff. But I wonder how much of like schizophrenia diagnoses are actually clairaudience. Do you know what I mean? And like, do we give people like that the right support? Who knows? That's another subject. But like, yeah, different clairsenses. And for me, I've noticed that clairsentience and claircognizance, so clear feeling and clear knowing, they're kind of my ways. And it's something that I've never really recognized because it's something that I've always done. That's part of me. So all of a sudden I will just get a feeling of something. Maybe that has to do with like being an empath or an HSP, you know, highly sensitive person. And also sometimes I get a knowing. I don't know how I know stuff, but it's like something just drops in and I just know this thing. And then it's a matter of finding, you know, finding maybe words to communicate it. That's another step to it. But that is how I do things. And I've had, you know, interesting moments where I remember how a friend visited me who lived up in Lincoln. This is years ago. She drove home. She got home. She was in a panic. She phoned me up. So I can't find my house keys. Have I left them behind? And I was like, I don't know. But all of a sudden they were under the passenger seat. So I told her, but I think she was too stressed and freaked out to actually take that in. So she was running around like a headless chicken trying to find. In the end, she found them under the passenger seat. But I just got a sense of it and I could see it like in my mind's eye. And there've been other moments like that. And I think as I've developed my intuition, like all these synchronicities happen. It's really interesting. Like you think of a person and then suddenly, you know, they message you or something like that, you know, all that kind of stuff. So that happens more and more. And yeah, I feel like discovering all that about myself and the, you know, the explorations of my own identity and meeting these people who are, you know, doing things differently, basically. I feel like it's not giving me permission as such, but like having a sense of belonging in this community has just opened me up in ways that I never really thought possible. And so I've explored this channeling thing. I did a course with someone to basically her approach to it is it's basically about self-trust, you know, like it's about trusting yourself and the guidance you get through. That's what it comes down to. And I also got really interested in, like a while ago, I came across the term light language. And just something in me was, all my senses were like ding, and I was like, what is this? I need to know more. And then I found like all the, you know, the sacred geometry and the symbols and the, I don't know, some people, you know, speak it as well. Some people do it in movements and things. And then I've found myself, you know, doing all these movements. Like if I let myself flow with things, I don't really know, my conscious mind has no idea what it is about. But then I'm also learning to trust that it doesn't necessarily need to know what it's about, but it's just something I'm playing with, something I'm just letting flow. I do a lot of drawing as well, like symbols come to my mind's eye and I draw them. And sometimes I just let myself like free write and things like that. I found that the talking of it, speaking of it, is something I think I have more resistance to. It's kind of like speaking in tongues and stuff. I don't know how much you know about light language and things like that, but yeah, it's very different. Like I know several people who do it. They all sound different. You know, some of them are like very melodic, some are very soft and gentle, some are a bit harsh, others are clicky. It's just fascinating. And this is something that I feel really drawn to. So I'm really curious to see where that's going to lead. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say, when I was in my very early 20s, I went through a bit of a weird time and I ended up leaning back into religion. But I'd been brought up in Church of England, which was, you know, it was a very friendly community, but in terms of religion was quite dispassionate and not particularly, they weren't really particularly spiritual people. I didn't feel, you know, there was no conversation about it. Even my own family, we went to church, but then didn't really discuss it the rest of the time. It didn't seem to filter through into anything else. It's just something we did on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And then early 20s, I decided, I was like, well, I think I need something like this back, but I couldn't work out what it was. And I tried out an evangelical church and a Pentecostal church. And this was a big evangelical church in the Midlands in England. And it had such a nice vibe to it. The moment that I walked in, I felt very touched. But some of the stuff they are into was, like, from my experience, was proper weird. One of those things was talking in tongues. I think they did it a bit at the Pentecostal church as well, which was just a tiny little community one. I went to both for a while. And and around that time I actually did it myself a few times.
Right.
But I think in the end, I don't know, I think I probably wasn't ready for it. And now I don't know, maybe because I've got a tie with it to religion, that's kind of like dampened it a bit for me. I've done sort of like singing in, and I don't know if I'm, you know, doing another language or it's just whatever's coming out. But like free singing, like you just, you know, it's coming out on the spot. But yeah, there's still a part of me that's like, it's odd because I try more and more spiritual things, and every time they work for me, every time I have like really strong experiences, and ultimately, whether people believe it or they don't believe it, I feel it's very nourishing and it's nice. It's a positive thing. But there's still part of my brain and how I was brought up to be skeptical to the point of joylessness. Where I look at these things that I'm doing and I'm like, and there's a tiny part of me going like, are you really doing that? That's really stupid.
Oh, totally. It's like you have to almost bypass the thinking mind for that, don't you? Because I think as soon as you start doing the speaking, perhaps, like, you then start judging what's coming out of your mouth. It's like, oh, that sounds like this, I wonder what it means, you know, and then all the chatter starts, doesn't it? Yeah I find that challenging as well. But the doodling seems to be quite fun, although sometimes I notice myself judging that, like when I'm just doing the free writing or drawing, and sometimes my brain is almost like, well, you can't put that on a t-shirt and sell it, can you? Come on, this needs to be better. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, what the fuck, I'm just doing this thing, leave me alone. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit like that. But especially when I sometimes put music on and I find myself just kind of moving, and then my hands start moving and I'm doing the things, and that feels really like easy and effortless. So I feel like that's kind of what I just let myself do and let myself play in that way. And then I mean, the other stuff might, you know, follow, or it might not, I don't know. But it's like, I feel like it's good to have like a detachment from it, because I think the more you try and hold on to something or like control stuff, like the less likely it's going to work out well, isn't it? So
yeah, definitely. I learned to do a lot of my and by the way, for those listening, there's something called remote viewing, and I think you know about this, don't you? But for the listeners, remote viewing has been so successful in certain settings that the CIA still to this day use it as part of their intelligence gathering with extreme accuracy. So this is not, this doesn't require total belief. If, like me, you often need a little bit of scientific backup occasionally, there's loads on it, and they've recently I think there was a TikTok account, and I can't remember what the TikToker's name is. I think they're a non-binary person. They talk a lot about conspiracy theories, but actually go into like the data of things. And I can't remember. I'll link it in the show notes if I can find it. But there's a lot of there's a lot of data on it, and a lot of things that still use. But I found that the best time, when I started learning to tune into my intuition and, you know, receive like messages and occasionally do a bit of remote viewing, but it doesn't quite work like that for me. It's like tuning into the person even if they're miles away. And I learned to do it in the car, and I reasoned that I was probably easily able to do it in the car because my monkey brain and my logical brain was sort of really engaged in keeping me alive and operating the car. So I was like, I felt like it was giving like some mad chimpanzee that lives in me, like something really like a banana or something to keep it occupied. But now I can do things like that, and it's so funny. Like I don't know about you, Esther, but I still have moments where I'm starting to do these intuitive things by accident, or somebody asks me and I'm sort of already there before I've decided to be there. And then the thing happens, and then I have a moment where I just sort of like draw, like I withdraw, and I'm like, oh no, I don't want to do it. Like I still have moments where I find it quite unnerving, and some of the things that I've done or come out with over time has been really odd. I had a friend who at the time was a medical student in Birmingham, and she came down to visit me in Hertfordshire every so often. And one time I was getting like a towel and stuff out for her for when she arrived, and I knew instinctively that she'd forgotten her pajamas, so I got some pajamas out to lend her as well. And when she arrived, before she opened her mouth, I said, by the way, I know you forgot your pajamas, so I've got you some out already. And she was like,
wait, what?
How did you know that? And I was like, I don't know. I
Yeah.
was just getting, and this was before I'd gone through my awakening. So the fact that this stuff was happening really freaked me out.
Yeah.
But how comfortable do you feel about it now? Like, are you pretty into it, or do you still have funny moments?
I have, like, I feel things are maybe slightly different or more like concentrated, especially like the synchronicities and stuff. When I notice them now, I just find it makes me laugh. Do you know what I mean? I'm just like, yeah, of course that happened. Do you know what I mean? Whereas in the past, I was like, what? You know? Yeah, but now I feel a lot more comfortable with it, and I think it's also partly to do with recognizing like how much more we are than just like these flesh and blood humans. Do you know what I mean? Like this tapestry of the universe and, you know, quantum physics and all that stuff, and we're all connected. And it's like, well, yeah, of course that happens, because it's like someone pulls a little thread somewhere. It's kind of like a spider's web, maybe. You know, if a spider makes a web in a particular way, and it knows like where something hits that web, like it knows the location, it knows like what it is potentially by the way it moves. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and it can go straight there. So I feel like it's kind of like that, this quantum entanglement thing. I don't know. Yeah.
I agree. That I think we're brought up to have this very individualistic, almost like a voyeuristic view of individuals, so that we kind of think that nature is outside of us, and that we're just looking, and we're just sort of there to consume and observe. But actually, not only are we part of it, but I think it's much more of a soup, and we're sort of interconnected in a way that we can't avoid. So
totally,
it makes
you can't
sense.
even comprehend, you know. Yeah,
exactly. So it makes total sense to me that that one would be able to feel. Are you looking to get your energy in order, spring clean your life, and manifest things you actually want? My Align Your Life Starter Pack has helped people to relieve insomnia, anxiety, to become grounded, and to manifest exciting new things, as well as cut energetic cords with people who were draining their energy. And as a bonus, it's designed with non-visual and neurodivergent people in mind, so it's more accessible than most things currently on the market. Affordable and instantly downloadable, you can find it at mooksharrishill.com/mybl. Align your life, reclaim your power.
Yeah, totally. And I had that with a friend of mine recently, especially I think people that I'm close to, because especially sometimes in intimate relationships, I can feel disconnected from them, and it used to make me feel really unsettled and unsafe. Do you know what I mean? So I had to, you know, dig into that a little bit. But I remember like a while ago, a friend of mine, she was going through some tough, you know, she had a few tough days, and it was interesting because I was like, she's not there. I can't feel her out there. Like sometimes you think of someone and they're kind of there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there was a difference. It's like I couldn't reach her. Like I couldn't find her. Like energetically, I couldn't find her. And then when I talked to her a few days later, like she resurfaced, and she was like, God, I had a really few, you know, I had a few difficult days, and I was going through some shit and all that stuff. And I found that really interesting. And it's good to have like, it's good to talk to people about that. So you get this particular feedback, which helps you then trust your guidance and intuition more. Do you know what I mean? Because it confirms things that you were feeling, and you're like, oh, you know, there's something in this, you know.
100%. Yeah, I still try to take the view that any intuition I get, I will hold it and wait to see what happens with it. And it doesn't matter if I've had intuitions 1,000 times, I will always just hold it in my awareness and wait until I get confirmation. And I always do, every single time.
maybe.
I have yet to be let down, but I still treat it with the attitude that I could be filtering it incorrectly, or I could have kind of corrupted it through my own human bias and error.
See, that's such a thing. And I find the subtleties in that is where that's where the real work is, I think. Because sometimes I can be thinking, oh, I'm an intuitive, I'm getting this guidance, I'm picking this up, so this is true. And then sometimes I've also gotten feedback where I was like, that was not true, and that was just me projecting things and assumptions, and maybe, you know, things that I learned as a kid, or like trauma responses and whatever, that I was projecting onto that, and thereby muddling it in a way, or muddying it or whatever. So I find it, that's where the work is, because the difference is so subtle, and it's about learning, like, what is actual guidance here, and what is my stuff, what is my own stuff that I'm just throwing into the mix here.
Yeah, definitely. It's a weird one. So tell us about how you began this sort of channeling, a very intentional channeling journey. Like, how did you find the person, and what was it like at the beginning?
Yeah, so the course I did was in, I think it was 2020 actually. 2020. Time is weird at the moment. I don't even know when things happened. But like, I got into the law of attraction and Abraham Hicks. This is years ago. I read their book, Ask and It Is Given. And then that just sort of, it went away again for a bit. And then they got on my radar again. I started watching loads of their videos. I got really into it. I even went on a Abraham Hicks cruise, which was really, really cool. Oh. And then I moved from their work to, like, I follow a lot of other channelers and stuff. So I watch a lot of channeling stuff. And that's kind of where I'm at now. I'm also in a light language group on Facebook. And it's just like, when I entered that group, I was a bit like, oh my goodness, here they all are. Do you know what I mean? It was like, wow, here's all these people, and it's normal to them. Like, this is, oh yeah, I'm doing a transmission of this, a frequency of that, and I'm like, there it is. Do you know what I mean? And part of my brain is like, what is actually, are you serious? Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, no, this feels good. This is good. I'm happy here. Do you know what I mean? And there are some people that are, far out there from my perspective, maybe, when I look at them. But there you go. It is, just because they're all in this or have this particular interest doesn't necessarily mean we're on the same page. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of diversity in that as well, I think.
Yeah.
So, so that's been more of a recent thing. And then, like, the light language, I came across it, and it's just something that I think I feel. And part of me, it's almost like it makes my skin tingle or something, or it just makes you go like, and it's like this resonance or something. Do you know what I mean? Like a maybe tuning fork or something like that, but on an energetic, like, rather than the sound way.
Yeah.
And then I feel like, just learning to follow that, those feelings and that guidance, which is very subtle. So that's kind of how I navigate that at the moment. And so the actual course that I did was that, I think that was, again, like my inner being, or my soul, whatever you want to call it, because that came onto my path. And this woman I met through another friend, and I've been on her radar and her newsletter and stuff, and in a few groups, and doing work with her, because she channels Prince, as in the artist, who's now an ascended master. And we had to all choose like a guide to work with, and what I got was Metatron. So I've got like this there, and other people in the group also chose their guides. So I've got like Metatron and Prince, as my main part of my team. And that's not something you say often to people. Do you know what I mean? Because they'd be like, excuse me, you might need some professional help. Do you know what I mean? You get that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But like, but that's, to me, it's like, that's the thing. Do you know what I mean? It's just,
Yeah, I've heard of people channeling through different spirits who've passed, and they're like sort of famous or whatever. I wonder, like, how, if it were me and I got assigned somebody who was kind of like artistically gifted but morally had done some repugnant things, like, I would find that very difficult to like square away.
Yeah, that would be hard, I think. Yeah.
How do you
all this? this
Yeah.
human perspective on, like, you know, I think right and wrong from maybe like a soul perspective, it's like it's not that simple, but we're like, oh no, we have very clear ideas of what's right and wrong, and like we all have that. I mean, there's, in my book, there's definitely some stuff that's wrong, do you know what I mean, that I don't want to go there, or like yeah. Sorry, what was your question?
No, so I was just wondering, like, how do you square away the fact that, like, you might have a guide who was previously in a human life, and like the rest of us, you know, sort of did some not so great things?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm aware of maybe one of my guides, aside from, like, there's different types of guides, right? And support and spiritual, you know, support from spirit we can get, like angels and archangels, and then spirit guides. They're all slightly different frequencies, I guess. But the guy that I'm aware of, he's like, I don't know much about him, except that I got this is also quite an interesting story. This was like, I'd been to Peru in 2005, I think, and I was having Reiki with my Reiki master at the time, who's also learning with. And when I went for a session after I got back, she said, oh, you've brought someone back with you. And I was like, excuse me, say what now? And she was picking up a guide, and he was like a tribe elder, like an indigenous person. And she could see me as his like granddaughter, I guess. And it's interesting because she says he's smoking a pipe, and there was a time in the room where we both got like scratchy throats and we were coughing, and she said, I'm just going to ask him to, you know, put it out for now, tone it down, and then our throats cleared up, you know. It was all like all this stuff going on. And I've been like, since then, I am sometimes aware of, it's hard to describe. It's like a sensation that I can feel, like if someone is like not quite touching you, but you feel something like on my temples. I can feel that sometimes. And I feel like I've had that since then, kind of thing. So that's how I know or recognize that particular guide. But I don't know enough about him to really, you know, what he would have done or not done, you know, in that time. But I mean, if it was someone like Christopher Columbus who would show up as a guide, I would be a bit like, see you later. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. Yeah, that would be tricky.
Well, I think particularly of Prince, like, I'm pretty sure he was a bit of a wife beater and wasn't.
I don't know about that. No, I have no idea.
I don't know loads, but I know that I'm pretty sure with his first wife, he was very abusive and controlling, and he like kept her in. I think he pretty much imprisoned her in their house for a bit, or didn't let her out. Wow. Like, there's a lot. So I mean, you know, it is more complicated than that. But I feel like, you know, I've got lots of sort of idols and people that I've grown up with, but obviously, like, a lot of them have complicated pasts. And
totally, and there's more and more of that coming to light now as well, isn't there? Yeah, that's tricky. I know I wasn't aware of anything like that.
I didn't want to ruin it for you, but at the same time, I was a bit like, I was just curious about like how it.
No, I didn't. Your question makes sense now. Yeah, it does. So interesting. I feel like, I don't know, I'd have to sit with that and process it a bit, you know. And also, not to excuse anything anyone does in their life, you know, when they're here. I think from a soul perspective, like I say, the whole it's a tricky subject, because I'm not excusing anything, absolutely not. I feel like from a soul level, I think when someone's had a life on earth, they've shed that life, do you know what I mean? And I feel like a soul is a completely, I don't know,
more of a,
I don't know if it's always a pure positive thing. Not always, I'm sure, but like overall, I think a lot of the time maybe it is. So I feel like his earthly self is or was like a very different energy, I think, than where and what he is now, I think. For sure. So to me, they're separate things. Okay. But there would definitely be a limit to, do you know what I mean? There are things that, you know, actions and that's a tricky one.
I mean, I can see that. I've had moments. I mean, when I was little, I was obsessed with ghosts and stuff. And then once my grandmother died when I was 13, my dad's mum, I
Mm-hmm.
kind of detached from all of that. So I still think
Mm-hmm.
that I have some connection to that, but I actually made a choice, you know, sort of over 20 years ago now, that
Yeah.
I didn't really want to get involved with that too much. But
Mm-hmm.
there are occasions when people have come to say goodbye and I've had full-blown conversations with them.
Interesting.
And,
Yeah.
you know, not, I don't hear them the way that I hear you as we're talking now,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
it also often, it came out of the blue. When my grandmother died, I think I hadn't had my ears pierced yet,
Mm-hmm.
but I had inherited some earrings from my grandmother and I was desperate to wear them for the funeral. So I was in the
Mm.
bathroom trying to pierce my own ears with some blunt earrings and getting
Oh.
really frustrated, and I was so upset.
Oh,
No,
wow.
but I was fine, by the way. I didn't eat, like,
Yeah.
nothing, obviously nothing happened, but I was just really like
Yeah.
emotionally distressed. And
Mm-hmm.
mid getting upset, I heard my grandmother laugh at me and I
Wow.
stopped in my tracks and she was like, silly. And I stopped crying immediately and was like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
Really, it really stunned me. I didn't feel threatened, but I felt totally
Mm.
like freaked out. I was like, wow, I must be that upset that I'm imagining that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was my first instinct, but then it's happened enough times, even, you know. And I had a job interview recently, and I mentioned
Mm-hmm.
in it, I said, you know, we were talking about sort of life experience and what I can support people in, and I said, well, I'm only 34, and I think in my lifetime I've been to somewhere between 40 and 50 funerals, so I'm quite well adjusted to death. And the
Right.
look on one of my interviewers' faces, she was like so shocked. She had to like take a
Yeah.
moment. And I was like, oh yeah, that's
Wow.
that's probably not everyone's experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, you know, like, I'm quite well adjusted, I think, when it comes to death. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
there'll be other deaths in my future that will be way, like, so close to home that it will probably spin me out a bit. But generally
Totally.
speaking, like,
Mm-hmm.
I've been pretty good at handling it. Still
Mm-hmm.
get very sad, obviously, but I think I'm well adjusted. So even when I've had these contacts with people who've died
Mm-hmm.
in recent years, I still have I have this moment where I'm like, well, I want to experience this. I don't care if it's real or not, so I'll go with it. And then this
Mm.
thing afterwards of feeling like totally like it was a profound experience, but also not sure if I
Yeah.
believe it. Now I'm not in it anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I feel like, especially learning about, the channeling maybe and the law of attraction stuff, that has helped me like see death differently, and it's helped me, I think, deal with it in a different way. 'Cause my dad died in 2019, and I feel like it's definitely done a lot for, how I've handled that and was able to handle that. And I find when someone dies, it's almost like I the way I view that and the way I can see that, that is one aspect of it. And I feel like that is a container that is not necessarily super intense, but when you then have to deal with, especially as an empath, all the other people who are dealing with the same thing, that's what I find really difficult. That's when I find it, like when I go to a funeral, like, because I feel like I pick up everything from all the other people there. And I can go to a complete stranger's funeral and cry and be very emotional because I'm just
Yeah.
picking up everything from everyone there. Do you know what I mean? And then I start thinking about it, and then I just get completely sucked in. And I can do that. That is definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
I was going to say as well, like, I find your experience is really interesting, like having conversations in that way. And I feel, I was going to say, like, I haven't really had that, but then a few weeks ago, I had a really quite profound experience as I was waking from a dream, but it didn't feel like a dream. And suddenly, well, I knew I was sleeping, and then I was kind of not, but it wasn't like a waking up. But I remember like looking at a screen at someone who just suddenly like went into a trance or something. And then I felt myself just getting like drawn into that. And it was a very visceral experience. And I felt this pressure on my head and my chest. And then when I woke up, I couldn't feel my arms for a while. It was fucking meant, do you know what I mean? I'd never experienced anything like that in my life. And I was like, holy shit. So I posted in a few groups, in Facebook saying, oh my God, this happened to me. And they're like, whoa, do you know what I mean? But like in the channeling group as well. So they were like, oh yeah, that's a thing, you know. And there was like, it was just a very surreal experience, and very like, I could feel it. And there were these waves of energy, and I could feel movement, and it was like, whoa, mind blown, you know. So I've just had that. That was a recent experience.
That's cool. Did anyone have any
promising?
Yeah, did anyone have any insight to what that was?
It had to do with, okay, so before then, it just gets more and more interesting. So I had a channeled session with the lady who runs the channeling group, and she recorded me. Sometimes she does offers, and like, you know, channeled message, this amount of money, and she sometimes gives discounts and stuff. So I signed up for it because part of me was, again, guided to do this, like I was with the channeling, like, do this thing. And I was like, wait, what? We're doing what? Yes, we're doing this thing. It's like your soul kind of lovingly shoves you forward, and like, yes, we're doing this thing. Just get on with it now. And it was similar with that session, because there was part of me was like, I had a browser tab open to buy it, and part of me was like, just do it already. And I was like, okay. So I signed up for this thing, and she sent me like a recorded message, just like half an hour long, and again with Prince and Metatron, and also Mother Mary and Jesus and my guides and all the things. And then they guided me through. There was some Akashic record work, and like, you know, sort of some information for the year ahead. And then Prince apparently channeled me a playlist, so he made me a mixtape that she also, this lady also channeled for me. And then I was told to listen to it every night before bed for 2 weeks. And I didn't even have to listen like with the sound up loud, you know. It was something that I could receive energetically, like the vibration of it I could receive energetically. So I did that, and it basically was around that time. Then I got ill after that as well. And then, you know, like somewhere in that time, that's when I had that dream / strange experience. So I think it had to do with raising, it had to do with raising my vibration, and like, you know, ascension and all that kind of stuff, which is an interesting thing in and of itself, I find, because my brain's a bit like, what the fuck is that even? Do you know what I mean? What the hell does that even mean? Like 3D to 5D and all that. I don't even know what it means. But it's like, yeah, like energetic shifts. It's very global, isn't it? It's very like the energy of humanity, maybe, the way as we evolve as a species. And, you know, who's to say? We don't know until we, you know, until we do one day, I guess. So you just kind of go along with it. But it was all part of that process. And it was like, you know, because my logical mind is a bit like, what? Do you know what I mean? Like all the things. If someone was telling me this, I'd be a bit like, sure, I don't even know how to respond to that. Do you know what I mean? But I'm like, well, this is the thing apparently, so let's just go with it. Woo woo.
I never thought I'd be the woo woo person either, but a number of times I come out with something, even just a tiny thing, and sometimes it is a channeling thing in a group of in a room full of people who are not particularly into that.
Right.
And they can't argue with it, because often what I've said is completely true, and they're like, I don't know what to think of that, but I also don't want to encourage you. So they just just really awkward.
Right. Yeah.
So I was thinking, Esther, kind of bringing these two kind of different tracks of conversation together towards the end of our conversation. This is something that I've come up against so much, and I wondered if it was the same for you. And that is that I think, as people who are very interested in being intersectional and ethical and critical of our own behavior and thoughts, beliefs, all that kind of thing, and kind of throwing norms out of the window, you know, flushing gender roles down the toilet, all that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Do you ever find that there are some grating moments, or perhaps some, you know, toxic positivity or privileged nonsense going on in the sort of spiritual new age world?
Oh, totally. Yeah. There's that toxic positivity and like spiritual bypassing. Do you know what I mean? Like, only love and light, only positive things allowed here. And you're like, no, that's not how it works. Do you know what I mean? Like, sweeping that under the rug doesn't help. So yeah, there's a lot of that out there. But I think, like every movement, maybe, whatever you want to call it, there's always going to be different interpretations of it by different people, aren't there?
Sure.
So I think you just got to see all the things for what they are and just let everything be there. Because I feel like real like light work, I suppose, is also like shining it on the shadow and being like, there you are, and that's okay. Do you know what I mean? Rather than thinking, there you are, I must fight you, I must eliminate you. Do you know what I mean? No fear, no this, no that. It's like, no, that's not how life works, is it? Yeah. And I think embracing that, especially in myself and for myself, with myself, by myself, has been like a major thing. I think that's been part of my therapy journey as well. Self-discovery and exploration, that kind of stuff. It's like letting all feelings be there, feeling all the feelings, and like just unconditional self-acceptance through that. It's like, no, I'm not the person I thought I was. I'm not like, I always thought I was this non-judgmental person. And then I realized, fucking hell, now I'm judgmental as hell. I just judge other stuff than normal people do. Do you know what I mean? So there you go. So you kind of just got to laugh at yourself as well, to be fair. But yeah.
So where do you think the healthy balance is between calling people out, but also making sure that your spiritual needs are being met in an environment that does nurture you for who you are?
That is such a good one. Wow. I do know that there are certain discussions and debates. I just don't go there because I know I'll just get pulled in. I'll get angry. I'll get, I will do exactly what everyone else is doing, which is shouting at each other. And that's not going to help anything. And I feel like for my own, like protecting my own energy, that is actually a thing that I need to be aware of. And that's part of the reason I live alone as well, because I like this recharging time, and it's really important for me. So I have to pick my fights, I suppose. I mean, there are some people out there who do that really well. They can take like all this hate that they get thrown at them in their stride, like Jeffrey Marsh and Alok Vaid-Menon and Rain Dove, and they're just amazing at responding to people like that with love. And that must be really challenging at times. But it is something that I aspire to be like as well. And I think if you can see both sides of not the argument necessarily, but like, I mean, even the bigger arguments, with the TERFs and stuff like that, it's like we're fighting amongst ourselves, and it's completely pointless, because what we all want is to be safe. We all want that. So why are we shouting at each other? Do you know what I mean? It makes no sense to me. And I feel like I don't want to join that shouting match. I feel like I want to position myself in a place where I just allow a certain space for expression. And yeah, it has to feel very like, it has to have integrity for me. And it has to feel aligned. And like, again, it's not all about positivity, because I talk about very intense stuff on my podcast with people as well. But yeah, it's not about staying positive. It's more about being real, and also like letting each other be. And like, when it's about your own personal experience, again, you can't be wrong. You can't be wrong about your own experience. That said, you might look back and think, oh, I was wrong about that. But at the time, that's where you were, so it's this journey that we're all going through. And I think the main arguments that people are having do come from like, I'm right and you're wrong. And the reason that feels so personal to us, I think, is like, if someone tells you you're wrong about your experience, like, that just seems completely nuts to me. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, how can you say that? Because you can't be wrong about your experience. Someone else does not know you better than you do. Even if you're still figuring things out and maybe having a difficult time, it doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? You still, you best.
Yeah.
So
I think the thing that I struggle with the most in those spaces isn't that people have got their own meaning and their own, I appreciate that individuality, and I think that all that stuff should totally be nurtured, and it is totally so valuable. But the issue I have, particularly with like cis heteronormativity, is this idea that because this is my truth, this is everyone's truth. Exactly. And then that puts me or us or whatever in a position where either I have to just spend ages blocking people or whatever, and I can't talk to them, or if I want to join in, I can't just respond with well, this also happens to me, but I'm not like that, or I'm the, I have those same things as you, but my experience is the opposite. It automatically, I feel like if I'm in a space where all of these normative or these norms are being pushed as truth for everybody, that's when I'm like, well, not only am I not being nurtured in this space now because there's no room for individuality and there's no acknowledgement and space being held for that.
Yeah.
I'm also now in a position where if I want to join in, or if I want to be heard or acknowledged, the same as the people who do relate to what's being said are, I now have to then fight for myself. So I've actually given up since I kind of gave up my activism, my active activism, I should say. There's still some other bits that are going on, but since then I've given up all spaces that don't actively include me, because I'm sick of educating people, and I'm I've got no interest in converting anybody.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, but at the same
and it's
time,
not your job. Do you know what I mean? It's not your job to educate people.
No, exactly.
And I feel like that's why allies, we need to all step up and be better allies as well. Like, because from my perspective with my gender journey, I still feel like an ally for the gender diverse, because I don't necessarily consider myself gender diverse in a way. I see myself as queer, but that's kind of it. And I feel like it's a small, like the whole people who are shouting the loudest and saying the nastiest things and stuff like that. It's pointless wasting energy on trying to convert those people, because they don't want to go. They're just going to dig their heels in and stay right there. But it's about not educating necessarily, but about maybe gently reaching people who don't know, who are kind of, blissfully ignorant, I suppose, not in a negative way, but they just don't know things. And it's about reaching them and helping them to understand things better, so that they can then spread that far and wide. Do you know what I mean? It's about, where do we focus our energy? That's a very important thing. And it is so easy to get sucked into these conversations and wanting to defend people and wanting to, do you know what I mean? And I just know I can't do it. It's just no good for me, for my mental health, so I don't go there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's okay, like if something comes up and it's a genuine question, like in a space that really gives you a lot, then I would really invest my responses into something like that. But generally speaking, I found that the new age spiritual movement, especially in terms of female coaches, is that the majority of those female coaches I've come across are cisgender, heterosexual, and they'll take my money, but they never address me in my messaging, in their messaging. So they'll start a meeting with, "Hey ladies," and I'm like, I'm here, I've talked to you, we've had this conversation. So I just don't do that anymore. If my if a practitioner isn't intersectional, isn't educated, then I just won't work with them anymore.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah. And people do need to learn about that kind of stuff, because it's such a tricky thing, isn't it? Like with the whole women's groups and women's spaces and stuff like that. And like, it's obviously up to the person who runs it, like how inclusive they want to be. But I do notice, like, even though I'm not trans or non-binary necessarily, if someone is being ignorant, or like not willing to change or learn, or being exclusive in their language, and if I were to address that with them and they don't change their ways, then it's not a space I would feel safe in either. It's like, no, I don't want to be in there either.
I definitely think it's a job for allies. I remember you asking me about this, I think it was last year, and you were like, "Oh, I don't know if it's really my space to like educate people about certain things." And I was like, "Please do it. Please do it. I don't want to do it anymore." And like, we definitely need everyone involved. So
totally. I mean, even today I made a restaurant booking for my birthday, which is coming up, and like, you have to fill in your details. Title is compulsory, and there's the usual options, and I'm like, excuse me, can we include like either a gender neutral title or just make the whole thing optional? Thank you very much, because this won't do. Do you know what I mean? I'm always doing that, and it's like a small thing, but it's like, it's easy for me to do. It's quick, and it's, and I think it's little things. People might think, oh, that's like, how does that even matter? But if everyone were doing that,
it drives me mad. There are some platforms, like recently I've been job hunting and flat hunting and all of this sort of thing. I think there was maybe one platform out of the 20 that I must have used in the past month or two. There was one that allowed me to actually put my actual real title that's on my blooming bank details. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the rest, and most of the rest of them refuse to let me continue using their services.
So annoying. They just don't understand. They're alienating people. They're excluding people.
Yeah.
And they might think, oh, it's only X percent of the population. That's not the fucking point. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh.
Yeah. Well, I emailed one of the platforms that I use. In fact, I'm going to out them. It's spareroom.co.uk. And
sort out spare room.
Well, it's really interesting that they have a box where you can tick that you're looking for exclusively LGBT friendly households.
Wow. So if that's an option, they should definitely have the rest of their shit sorted, shouldn't they?
Well, exactly.
Otherwise, it just feels like they're just doing it for the sake of it, and they're not really taking it seriously, or they're not really understanding what they're trying to do here.
No, it's lip service, or it's half cooked. And
exactly. Yeah.
So I've sent them a pissy email. That was 2 days ago, and they promised they usually get back to me within a few hours.
Yeah.
And I don't have anything yet. So hopefully it was strongly, because I tried to look for a place through them 2 years ago and had the same problem, and emailed then, and they promised they were going to sort it out. That was 2 years ago.
Seriously, that's just rubbish, isn't it?
And they're a massive company, like, they're the number one like room finder platform in the UK.
Yeah, and they might think, oh, well, it's a lot of work, just make it optional. Do you know what I mean? Like, so people can either put it in or leave it blank.
Yeah,
it's really that easy. It's not like rocket science, is it?
Yeah. Well, if I wanted to make an ad, I would have to choose I am male or female looking for a room in a male or female or mixed house.
Oh god.
And I'm like, you obviously know LGBT people exist and you want to offer us a service, so why is it so
why
basic?
are you not doing it
in 2022 for God's sake?
Right. Oh crikey. Yeah.
Anyway, I could call out people all day. I haven't got the energy.
Yep.
So before we go, Esther, is there a book that's coming out soon?
Oh, well, now that you mention it.
plug.
Yes. Dun, dun, dun. Yes. So the book that I've contributed a chapter to, which is very exciting, is called Sacred Redesign, and it's out on April 22nd. I should have looked up the subtitle of it, or like it's like how to free yourself from society's standards and live heaven on earth. I think that's what the subtitle is.
Well, I will release this episode after that. So if you're listening to it now, the book is available, called Sacred Redesign, of which Esther Lemmens here is a co-author. You have to say that you're a co-author now, Esther. You can't say that you contributed a chapter.
I know. I need to own my shit, but I find it so hard. I'm like, I did this thing. Don't worry about it. So I'm getting there.
I honestly, after becoming a best-selling author last year, I was like, first of all, I had to take a week off because I couldn't cope. But then after that, I saw my writing friends and they were like, oh, you're a best-selling author now. And I was like, yeah, can we just not talk about that?
We're not.
And they're like, what do you mean? Like, you've worked so hard for this and this, that, and the other. I was like, listen, I only contributed one chapter. It's not like I wrote a whole book. I didn't go through all of that. Right. Like it was a sort of group sourced thing.
Yeah.
Like there were like I didn't really have to bleed for this. And they were like, so what? They're like, so what? They were like, you're a best-selling author. You have to say it now. And I was like, shut up. I'm not saying that. But eventually, I think at the beginning of this year, I was like, okay, I need to just accept that. And I was like, yeah, it is what it is. So It's
Yeah,
weird.
I feel like I'll get there, but like I'm definitely not there yet. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I look forward to also reading like what all the other authors have contributed and stuff, and I've been getting to know them a little bit, and it's really lovely, so it is very exciting.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
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 Well, congratulations.
Thank
What
you
an
very
exciting
much.
thing.
It is.
You're going to be published, man. That's so cool.
I know. Oh my God, I can't even.
It's so weird, isn't it?
It is.
Do you know what? I had this really big, like weird existential, it was just like a day maybe of really thinking about it. And I was like, if I died now, I have something published.
Yeah,
Like,
I've had those moments.
yeah,
Absolutely.
like if I
Leaving
die,
something behind. Yeah.
yes, I've left something behind. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
everything in the universe is temporary / simultaneously exists all at the same time.
Totally.
So, it's not like it's going to last forever, but the idea that I've
Yeah.
contributed something to society and that if I died now, then it will still exist. That was really odd to me. Maybe it's how parents feel, but I don't know.
Yeah, that makes total sense though. Yeah. And I feel similarly about my podcast. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I've put this thing out into the world and like people have listened to it. And like if it touched even one person's life, then wow.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. All right. Well, I will put the link in the show notes when this goes out so you can go and order yourself a copy.
Yay.
Esther, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure. The time has flown by.
It has. Thank you for having me on. That was really fun.
Such a pleasure. Cheers. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it and think someone you know might benefit from it, please do share it with them and leave me a review. If you'd like more resources and information, you can go to my website, mooksharrishill.com, where you can also join my mailing list or Facebook group to stay up to date and in contact. You can also connect with me on social media at Empaths Revolution. The Empaths Revolution podcast was created and produced by your host, Harris Eddie Hill.